This is live from New Delhi. You're watching DT India, India's voice to the world. This is special broadcast Prime Minister Modi in Guyana. And I'm Sakal Bhatt. And from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil to Guyana, Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi is on a last leg of his three-nation tour. Coming up in the next 2 hours on this special broadcast, we will keep an eye on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Guyana visit. First by an Indian Prime Minister in more than 5 decades, marking it definitely a historic one. We will be joined by the subject experts, former ambassadors to decode the significance of this visit, the broader deliverables and the agenda. We also will be going live to Georgetown for live visuals and reportage from DT India team on ground. So let's begin. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Guyana on a last leg of his three-nation tour, and in an unprecedented gesture, he was received at the Georgetown airport by Guyanese President Dr. Mohamed Irfaan Ali and Prime Minister Mark Phillips. This is the first ever visit of an Indian Prime Minister in over 5 decades. Taking to social media post, Prime Minister Modi expressed confidence that this visit will deepen the friendship between the two nations, India and Guyana. During the 2-day visit, the two sides will exchange views on giving strategic direction to the unique relationship that the both nations share, which is based on shared heritage, culture and values. Prime Minister Modi also will join leaders from the Caribbean partner countries for the second India-CARICOM Summit. The summit will enable the leaders to renew historical ties and expand cooperation into new domains. And from the airport, Prime Minister Modi went to the hotel where he was received by Guyana's President, Prime Minister of Grenada and Barbados, besides the Guyanese cabinet. In a very special gesture, Prime Minister was also handed over the key to the city of Georgetown by the Mayor of Georgetown as a testament to the close ties India and Guyana share. And the hotel lobby was adorned with vibrant cultural displays from India, and the atmosphere was filled with sense of pride and celebration to welcome Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi. And inside the hotel premises, Indian and Guyanese community greeted Prime Minister Modi with traditional hospitality, and they also showcased their respect and admiration for their leader. Meanwhile, Guyana will confer its highest national award, the Order of Excellence, on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Barbados too will join to confer the prestigious Honorary Order of Freedom of Barbados on Prime Minister Modi. Dominica had too announced its highest national award, Dominica Award of Honor, on Prime Minister Modi a few days back. And with these additions, the number of international honors for Prime Minister Modi has touched 19. It has reached 19. Let's introduce and welcome our special panel on this very special show. Let me welcome Ambassador C. Rajashekhar. In our Delhi studio. He is the former Indian ambassador to Cuba and former Director General ICCR. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Welcome. And also, I take this opportunity to welcome Professor Swarn Singh from School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you, Professor Singh, for joining us. And I'm going to start with Ambassador. For the benefit of our viewers, if you could just give us an overview of the contours of significance. What makes this visit of Prime Minister Modi special to a country like Guyana? And also for the fact that this is historic because this comes after a very long gap of more than 5 decades. And the kind of reception, unprecedented, that has been accorded by the Guyanese administration.
Thank you very much for inviting me. As you have mentioned rightly, this visit of the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji to Guyana comes after 1968, when the last Prime Minister of India had visited. So this truly very great landmark visit, what we say, is coming after such a long period. But to give you the true perspective, what is the population of Guyana? It's a very small population. It's not even 1 million people. And secondly, what is the size of Guyana? It is about 200,000 square kilometers. And how far? It's very far, almost on the other end of the universe. So this shows, you know, the vision and statesmanly mindset of Honorable Prime Minister. I'll take you back to our ambassadors conference back in 2015. He addressed all the ambassadors. Yours truly was also there.
Okay.
And he told us, ambassadors, you understand India and Indian leadership, our vision. I don't want any shikayat, complaint from the farthest, the tiniest country that Hindustan hame pucha nahi hai.
Okay.
Meaning, I don't want a complaint from the farthest, the tiniest country that India doesn't care about us.
Significance.
So here is Guyana, true to that exhortation. Honorable Prime Minister himself is there in person, despite his very many demands on his time. That shows. And exactly the corresponding enthusiasm that
this was in 2016?
2015, February.
Okay.
February 2015, okay. That makes it about 9.5 years ago.
Okay.
It's almost.
Okay.
So exactly the people of Guyana, you have seen that a while ago.
That's during the first term of Honorable Prime Minister.
Yes, that was soon after he became. And also Honorable Prime Minister has instructed all of us, including union ministers and secretaries and all, to undertake visits to each and every country, regardless of the size and distance. So,
and I think we've seen that happen.
We've seen that happening. A lot of ministerial visits you must have listed, and a lot of important dignitaries visiting Guyana. And also we have hosted very many of their presidents and prime ministers and important leaders.
In fact, President Ali was here in Pravasi Bharatiya. There was one of the special guest invitees.
Yes.
And there is already a robust education and ITEC cooperation. When you talk about the existing bilateral relationship, it's based on bilateral mechanisms also. We'll talk
scholarships.
About scholarships.
We have educated by now more than 600.
We have assisted them in their various infrastructure projects. Ambassador, we will talk about all this. We have 2 hours to talk about it. But I want to just take that point that you raised, that which talks a lot about Prime Minister Modi's vision, that wherever and where all India has to reach and go, and foster ties and consolidate those ties, and even that includes Guyana. Professor Singh, if you have heard points made, opening remarks made by Ambassador Rajashekhar, how do you look at this, for the fact that we know that CARICOM's top leadership has already acknowledged the kind of important global role that India has played. I'm quoting them, important global actor. India is an important global actor, coming from CARICOM's top leadership, and this was ahead of Prime Minister's visit there, sort of signifying the kind of importance that Guyana chooses to attach to Prime Minister Modi's visit.
Thank you, Sakal, for placing this visit of Prime Minister to Guyana in the larger view of those countries about India and India's view about the world. Usually, in earlier decades, Latin America, South America were seen as the last frontier for India's foreign policy. But now, with India's changing and growing stature and connectivity around the world, we have seen that part of the world also getting in regular interaction with India. So it's not just Prime Minister's visit standalone. There has been a constant transformation of how India has been dealing with these countries. Indian Foreign Minister has visited 8 of these countries in the last 3 years. And of course, Indian Prime Minister's visit is not just to Guyana, but as you mentioned, also engaging with CARICOM countries. It's a Caribbean community and common market of 20 countries in the region.
Yes.
Where India is trying to connect. But let me quickly say with Guyana, there are 4 things that make Guyana unique in terms of why India's engagement has to be starting from Guyana in this case. First of all, despite being a small population, about 40% of population is from Indian origin.
Yes, yes.
Including, of course, President Mohamed Irfaan Ali, who has also been the alumni of India's International Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. He's spent time in India. He knows India very well, was chief guest at our program for Pravasi Bharatiya last year. And of course, the latest push now has come from the recent discoveries of oil and gas in Guyana. You'll be surprised to know that because of those discoveries last year and last year, there was an economic boom and transformation in Guyana, about 62% economic growth according to IMF, which is unprecedented. No country has achieved that kind of growth, even if it is from a smaller size. And India, on the other hand, almost 88% of our oil is now imported crude oil. And in that sense, when we spent $132 billion last year on importing crude oil, that link can be very significant, I understand. So apart from connecting the region, apart from connecting us for our needs for importing oil, Indian population being there, the president being the one of Indian origin in that sense, there are multiple ways where I think Guyana becomes significant. But remember, this is part of India's outreach to Latin America in general.
What's also interesting to note that I've pulled some numbers. Our research team has put some numbers. The rapid growth in Guyana, which has driven their economy, with GDP expanding by a staggering 62.3% in 2022, which has been the highest globally then. And Sir, Professor Singh talked about oil. Rich oil reserves of Guyana, and we're looking at some sort of more convergence and collaboration, not really jumping the gun, but if you could just give us an insight as what are the kind of bilateral optics or deliverables that are on table. We're going to talk about energy. Are we going to talk about hydrocarbons? Are we going to do a lot of conversations about oil import, export, etc.? Because there has to be a business component.
Yes. As in the introduction we have mentioned, it's a quite broad-based. So the relations are strengthened by different dimensions. One is we have, as Professor has mentioned, diaspora, a considerable large segment, 40% of Guyanese owe their origin to India. They went about 170 years ago as indentured laborers, and they speak Hindustani, and they are more religious than us. Come Diwali, they do fasting.
Okay,
I'll give you a very interesting episode.
Fasting during Diwali?
Yes. I was in the neighboring Trinidad. So they were the Guyanese friends, one Mr. Randy Depot and others.
Very strong cultural linkage.
Very strong culture. In fact, when they land in India, they take mitti and they put it on their head, so with most reverentially. The point is, when I sent a friend, influential friend, I told a friend in India that, please host. So Diwali, they took them home. And our concept of Diwali celebrations, he opened, whiskey, and he said, Toba, Toba, this is fasting time. I cannot be drinking. So they're very religious. They look up to India. They look up to India both in terms of tradition, spirituality, and also in modernity in terms of development. They look up to us for
Yes. Professor Singh, they look up to India as reiterated by Ambassador Rajashekhar, and they particularly look up to India under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the kind of unprecedented, can we go to Professor Singh please, unprecedented welcome that was accorded to our Prime Minister. You have half of the cabinet there, you have the heads of the state there coming and receiving the Prime Minister, defying the protocol, I believe. But this is special because Prime Minister Modi of India has come to Guyana.
Sakal, you started your program by mentioning the unusual welcome that Indian Prime Minister has received. Indeed, Indian Prime Minister has received highest civilian awards from several countries, including 3 countries from this region. So Prime Minister personally has been seen as a very welcome partner for these countries. Of course, India's growth rate also makes it very attractive in terms of economy doing much better. And therefore, economic partnerships, whether it is in sectors of agriculture, pharmaceuticals, India is a pharmacy of the world, so pharmaceutical is another great connection. During pandemic, many of them were thankful for India sending paracetamol and other medicines and later vaccines also. Now growing relationship in energy, whether it is renewable energy or it is gas and oil, traditional energy, information and communication technologies. I am told about 40,000 jobs are created by Indian IT industries in Guyana. And of course, India has also line of control with Guyana, like in many other countries. India recently supplied HAL-228 aircraft to them. We have provided solar lights for about 30,000 plus indigenous homes there. So, on the ground, India is visible, and of course, Prime Minister himself is very visible around the world as he travels.
Okay.
And he builds very strong connections, which are supported by India's connections in several sectors across the field. And that, I think, is a kind of a new engagement of India. Indeed, let me say that several traditional countries of Asia who were engaged in this region, like Japan or Indonesia or Vietnam, Thailand, India's trade in last 20 years has gone up with Latin America from just $1 billion to now $43 billion, going ahead of all of these traditional major countries that were engaged with Latin American countries. I mentioned Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and so on. Except China is unusual. China has about $450 billion of trade with Latin America, but the transformation that has occurred in last 20 years, particularly in last 10 years, the way we engage these countries, is showcasing how that welcome becomes unusual, how that short visit becomes so fruitful in terms of also organizing CARICOM India summit meeting, which will open doors for several sectors for cooperation. For example, India's deep very attractive to many of these countries.
Right.
India sector, renewable energy, so many things. Healthcare is another area. So I think it's an excitement about India engaging, and them engaging India is very interesting and welcome.
So we will talk about these areas or fresher areas of convergence and collaborations between India and Guyana, especially in this visit. We're going to take that one by one. But before that, Professor Singh and Ambassador Rajashekhar, let's understand how the economics and the trade relations have expanded over the years between India and Guyana. And there is a structured mechanism which we talked earlier through the Indo-Guyana Joint Commission, which is a very robust mechanism already in place. So let's roll out these graphics and talk about the total trade in recognition, in acknowledgement of Indian Prime Minister's significant contributions. Dominica Award of Honor has been announced for Prime Minister Modi, as well as his efforts to enhance the bilateral relationship between India and Dominica. This is the Award of Honor for Prime Minister Modi that was announced by Dominica. The award ceremony will occur at India-CARICOM Summit. And summit is scheduled, of course, from 19th to 21st in Georgetown, Guyana, which is underway today being the day one. Indo-Guyana bilateral ties. Let's now talk about the trade and investment so far. The total trade between the two nations in 2021 amounted to 46.97 million US dollars. It has seen a significant rise of a whopping 46% over the previous years. That's the trade and investment volume that we are looking at, where Indian exports to Guyana stood at 35.69 million US dollars. Also, India imports from Guyana stand at 11.28 million dollars. This is the trade and investment volume between the two countries, where India's single largest export item to Guyana is pharmaceuticals, and perhaps that explains how we assisted them in COVID. Single largest import item from Guyana is usually wood and wood products, and economic and trade relations between India and Guyana are structured through Indo-Guyana Joint Commission, the mechanism which is already in place, where the total trade between the two nations in 2021 India has donated 80,000 doses of Covishield to Guyana earlier in 21 under Vaccine Maitri initiative. India has also donated $1 million in 2020 under India-UN Development Partnership Fund to upgrade Guyana's critical healthcare infrastructure to combat COVID-19. This was when COVID hit the globe. India also helped them to procure over 34 ventilators, thousands and thousands of protection equipment and emergency care medicines. India provided around 30,000 hydroxychloroquine tablets to Guyana last year as a gesture of goodwill in support of its fight against COVID-19. Also, to talk about India's assistance, it has funded 500,000 US dollars to prevent teenage pregnancies in Guyana in coordination with UNFPA. Okay, Ambassador Rajashekhar. So there's already a robust mechanism that exists between the two nations, but the fact that now Prime Minister Modi is there for 2 days, and in all probabilities, Guyana would play a role in India's quest to diversify its energy needs and requirements.
Yes.
First of all, what's the kind of business that India is looking at?
Yes. So before we get into the...
Okay, we are getting some visuals from Georgetown of Prime Minister Modi's arrival at the venue.
सेरेमोनीगत वेलकम किया जा रहा है प्रधानमंत्री का औपचारिक तौर पे स्वागत.
This is the ceremonial guard of honor being accorded Minister of India Narendra Modi by the Guyanese administration establishment. On your screens, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi accompanied by the Guyanese President. This is live from Georgetown, Guyana, ceremonial guard for India's Prime Minister. Okay, live visuals from Georgetown, Guyana. Prime Minister Modi of India being accorded the ceremonial guard of honor in the presence of Guyanese President Dr. Mohamed Irfaan Ali. And we saw the play out of the national anthem of India soon after, followed by the play out of national anthem of Guyana, and after that Sare Jahan Se Acha play out, I think, which is also very, very symbolic in many terms. And before I turn to my experts, we must like to tell our viewers that this is day one of Prime Minister Modi's two-day Guyana visit, and reportedly there could be restricted meetings between the two leaders and also delegation level talks. We'll get you the visuals as and when the developments happen there as far as Prime Minister Modi's first day itinerary is concerned. But sir, Sare Jahan Se Acha in the lawns in Georgetown, I think,
yes, it's
is a lot of symbolism attached.
Yes, it's certainly worth noting. It shows that, the locals, are so enthusiastic that, they would like to play your tune, and also that too, the one which says that of all the countries, India is the best. And this is played on steel pan. Guyana, before discovery of oil now and earlier, was a very poor country. So it had to invent musical instruments. So it came up with, steel pan.
Steel pan.
Pan, P-A-N, pan.
Okay.
So basically you cut a drum. And when you cut, say you have one end, and into that, you round it up nicely, and on that you play just as you play drums. So steel pan, P-A-N, so that's a local speciality. That improvisation, and on that mastering this your Indian number, that shows how enthusiastic they are to welcome the Honorable Prime Minister of.
Let's hear Professor Swaran Singh's thoughts on this. Professor Singh.
I think there is definitely a whole transformation taking place in this tiny country called Guyana because of economic boom. So the enthusiasm is increasingly different. To give you a simple example, this faraway country has seen India's exports growing at 25% year-on-year basis for last 5 years. So economic linkages that it is building around the world, and surprisingly the biggest export India does, as Ambassador was saying, they are quintessentially Indian, very grounded in terms of culture and religion. Spices is the highest commodity that we export, other than, of course, other things like medicines and
pharmaceuticals particularly. Yeah.
And in that sense, I think this connection of them feeling at home, singing Sare Jahan Se Acha, it reflects that nostalgia that many of these continue to have about India being their, ancestral home in that sense. And that showcases that when Indian Prime Minister goes there, the way the Indian Prime Minister receives a welcome is not simply driven by the economic partnerships or technical partnerships that India may have with them, but it's also historical, cultural, linguistic, and so on, religious connections, which make them feel that, it's like someone of their own has come to see them and come to visit them.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm of both the new economy and old relationship is combined to see that great enthusiasm there.
Yes. In fact, since you talk about the diaspora and the Indian origin Guyanese there, let's take a look at these numbers now. Interestingly, Guyana's Indian origin community constitutes 40% of its population, which forms a unique bridge between India and Guyana. We have those numbers on your screen. So about 40% of the population of Guyana is of Indian descent, and number of Indian nationals is not much. It's about 1,500, but they are mainly the members of the mission, Indian Cultural Center of the mission, or staff of Bank of Baroda. Okay, we have a Bank of Baroda in Guyana, and other international agencies. You have doctors, nurses, students of private medical institutions, among others. Besides this is a small Sindhi community holding different nationalities. They also live in Guyana. And also talking about the ITEC arrangements, so far more than 800 Guyanese nationals have benefited from these ITEC programs in various streams, including information technology, telecom, entrepreneurship, administration, renewable energy, alternate energy, banking, insurance, finance, accounts, audit. Around 50 ITEC slots were allotted to Guyana in the year 2021-22, while 55 slots, under those slots, EITC courses were offered in 2021-22, and then in 22-23, these slots increased to 75. They've been allotted to Guyana, out of which 40 were utilized in addition of 30 EITEC courses. Shifting focus to education, 9 scholarships are being offered to the Guyanese students under Commonwealth Scholarships Plan and 4 under ICCR scholarship schemes for studying Indian culture. So,
yeah, you were saying that ITEC, it is Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation, which is basically born out of India's desire to share our developmental experience with similarly placed, friendly developing countries.
And there are ICCR scholarships also.
ICCR offers academic scholarships. ITEC is about technical. For example, if they want to come and study and learn the best agricultural practices, best information technology practices, or any other administrative matters, all other things, their choice in the finest of centers of excellence in India. They'll get the passage also paid round trip, plus the cost of boarding, lodging and tuition. And in fact, while going back, we also give them extra baggage allowance so that in case they want to carry anything nostalgic souvenirs also. That's the kind of thing. Now, one of those courses is very interesting, called, it offered at Tilonia in Rajasthan, at a college called Barefoot College. Barefoot.
Okay.
You're raising your eyebrows rightly.
Yes.
Because, say, out of illiterate men and women, we transform them into solar engineers, how to harvest solar power. So we train them into, how to harvest solar power, how to, do the designing and the connection. And this also has been offered to countries like Guyana. And from Guyana, we also concurrently cover St. Kitts and Antigua and Barbuda. These 3 countries are covered from Georgetown. Plus, we have this time availing the visit of Honorable Prime Minister. We invited all the heads of governments of neighboring Caribbean countries, CARICOM countries.
I was coming to CARICOM. Now, Professor Singh, India's role as the voice of the global south that supports the political and economic aspirations of the global south. So Prime Minister was in Nigeria before Brazil, and now he's going to be attending the CARICOM Summit. Clearly, India leading from the front. The concerns / aspirations of the global south is just not rhetoric. I mean, India is there and India is making it happen.
Sakal, India leading from the front, that mindset is a civilizational mindset, whereas Indian Prime Minister repeatedly says India has looked at the world as family. So at some stage, India was focused on leading non-alignment. We have since moved into multi-alignment, now emerging as leaders of global south. Difference is that when we were focusing on non-alignment, then the axis around which that imagination was built was security-centric. Now, multi-alignment and global south is built around the axis of development. So we want to build partnerships for enhancing mutual development with all these countries. And that is where you see this engagement with Africa, engagement with CARICOM Summit, with Indian Prime Minister being there, is a link which is with larger number of countries, where India already has held 3 Voice of Global South Summits. India ensured Africa joins the G20 summit meeting, becomes the 21st member. So that vision of India, where to make global governance holistic, make it inclusive, we are always seen, we have always been the voice of the least developed and developing countries. And now this new genre of global south is the one which is being created, focusing on how we can share development, not just wait for the global north to help us, but can global south do self-help and build their own partnerships, which is where, for example, India's DPIs are becoming very, very attractive. India's pharmaceutical sectors are becoming very interesting. India's ICT sector is becoming very interesting. And that is building constant linkages with these countries. And Guyana, therefore, having hosted the CARICOM to make sure the Indian Prime Minister is there. The second summit meeting of India-CARICOM countries takes place. These are 20 countries with which India is exploring whole lot of different kinds of cooperation.
Yes. So let's see the array of nations that come under the CARICOM. Their composition constitutes of 21 countries, as you pointed out, sir, out of which 15 are member states and 6 are associate members. I'm just going to quickly read out for the benefit of our viewers because it's very pertinent to understand which are these CARICOM nations and what makes Prime Minister Modi's address at the summit of this CARICOM summit very, very essential if you look at it through the prism of leading global South voice. We have countries like Antigua, Barbuda, Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, of course, Haiti, Jamaica, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, you talked about St. Kitts, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and Grenadines, Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago. So all these countries are going to be represented at the summit. Yes. So significance of the summit.
Yes, like we have various regional groupings like SAARC and ASEAN. Similarly, there in the Caribbean region, which is the southeast of the United States, there are all these largely former British colonies, if you see.
Yes.
They are English speaking and playing cricket and also have incidentally strong cultural linguistic bonds with us. So it makes eminent sense to optimize the visit of the Honorable Prime Minister.
In fact, Guyana is the only English speaking country in South America. I mean,
yes, because
if I'm not wrong,
most of them, others, they speak Spanish except Brazil, which speaks Portuguese. You're right that way. In fact, Guyana is more Caribbean than South American that way. So coming back, we have very many dimensions of relations. One is diaspora, because 40% of them owe their origin to India. They have their strong linguistic, religious, traditional bonds. Their names also, read like Shiv Narayan, Chandrapal, like it.
The cricketer.
Cricketer.
Yeah.
So second thing is cricket. Cricket is common, so much so that when we asked Guyanese friends, how can we help in your nation building, they asked for.
I think we've assisted their
national cricket stadium.
Yes.
There has been built with the assistance of India at a considerable cost, $25 million. And here I want to quickly underline that all that counts cannot be counted. We should not get into counting pennies, cents and dollars, everything. Because if you see the Sare Jahan Se Acha, the kind of enthusiasm, the cricketing bonds and Hindustani connection, see this, nobody says that it's so far away from India. So the friendship between India and Guyana has literally transcended both space and time. And
correct.
Today, thanks to the vision and statesmanly leadership of Honorable Prime Minister, we are on the cusp of taking it much closer because technology enables us today. We can do a lot of things virtually. You have read out that e-ITech. So we can do a lot of education, collaboration virtually,
which we are doing.
Seamlessly we are doing.
Professor Singh, this importance, significance in terms of India's Caribbean outreach, the CARICOM Summit.
Absolutely, Sakal. You saw in G20 summit also, there was an outreach with the regional leaders, and therefore Indian Prime Minister was not just able to have bilaterals with about half a dozen or more leaders from the G20, but also meet some of the local regional leaders like President of Chile, which is in news because he's the youngest president. And now similarly in CARICOM meeting several heads of these countries. Just like Indian Prime Minister goes to Papua New Guinea, then they hold this Pacific Island State Summit meeting, giving an opportunity to Indian Prime Minister to maximize potential of these visits, to meet several regional leaders, because obviously maybe visits to each of these countries is not easy. We are all saying after 1968 visit of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, this is the first visit of Indian Prime Minister to Guyana, despite 40% of them being of Indian origin, and sustaining that strong links of religion and culture with us. So regional leaders outreach meetings provide a great opportunity to fast forward in that sense several potential initiatives that can lead to India being helpful to them and building economic partnerships. So right now with CARICOM, for example, there is enormous interest in renewable energy that India can provide to them, and transition to green energy is a global issue now. Healthcare is another important area where India is getting interested. Connectivity in terms of transport and communications, DPIs. So many of these small countries find, neighboring countries, Suriname again is great link, as Ambassador would tell you, with India from historical times. And that I think is important to understand, that these economic relationships are being built on the basis of India being perceived as a friendly country. Vishwamitra. We are not there to dominate and sort of take advantage of these countries. India is going out there as a friend of the world in that sense. And some of these countries fully understand that word of friendship because of their own cultural, historical, religious links with India. And when they are able to organize these regional meetings of this nature, like CARICOM is being organized now, this maximizes what can be achieved from the short visit of 2 days to Guyana, where there's a lot more is happening in bilateral relationship, but also opportunity to engage, connect, and build partnership with several regional leaders as well, which is where I think India's credentials as spokesperson or a voice for Global South also gets reinforced in that sense of India's constant engagement with them, India's effort to take their interests, take their perspectives, take their concerns to the other larger global forums like G20, for example. So India brings up these issues for them on those high tables.
And what are going to be their interests in India? We spoke about India's interest in terms of energy security, as the small Caribbean island, Professor Singh, you pointed out, is emerging as a potential major petroleum and gas power. But if you look at from the other side of prism, Guyana's interest in India.
Is that question to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Definitely, India is, if nothing else, if I have to pinpoint one simple issue, is seen as, very rapidly growing economy. So with 7 to 8% growth rates in India, there are going to be enormous transformations in all sectors, making India a very attractive partner across several sectors. Guyana, since you brought Guyana's question, I did mention India's exports to Guyana have been growing 25% year-on-year basis for 5 years, even if it is a small trade. But the growth rate shows the enthusiasm and attraction of what they want to, ensure that India supplies to them. India's exports to them are increasing, shows that they have interest in engaging India also. What Guyana sends to us is, of course, usually raw materials relatively, largely, in fact, India being the leader of cutting and polishing diamonds. Guyana sends us rough diamonds. It also sends us rough wood, which we improvise and turn it into various things like furniture. They also provide us, for example, aluminium ore. So at this stage, apparently, largely various crude commodities are being sent, and now crude oil also is the next major commodity. Again, India is the world leader now in refining crude oil and turning it into usable oil of different varieties.
And even commercial drilling since 2019, a lot of...
That partnership, I think, is another important area that is going to happen, because it's a new find of oil and gas. Guyana would find India as a very trustworthy partner in oil exploration, and ONGC, which has been working in many other countries like Russia, Vietnam, and so on, would be a very attractive partner for Guyana to ensure that in their oil explorations and harnessing of their resources, India can also be an important player. And in that sense, because India is also second largest importer of oil, this can be a very interesting swap arrangement where we can invest.
A win-win relationship or a win-win situation, Ambassador.
Yeah, if I may elaborate that further to what Professor has explained. So here is a small country, Guyana, or other CARICOM countries. They would like to see first and foremost what is causing accelerated economic development of India at the rate of 7-8%, the fastest growing developing country. What is it? So that is of first and foremost interest from their perspective. And secondly, how they can partake in this process, how they can
success story, growth story.
So here comes our offering of sharing of developmental experience through ITEC program, or ICCR academic scholarships, or trade and investment, joint ventures, and ONGC working there, Bank of Baroda opening their branch. All these things are, useful channels for us to collaborate.
Correct.
And the increasing trade is a symbol, but much more can be done, as Honorable Prime Minister tomorrow would be telling the CARICOM heads that come, be part of this exciting India's growth story and be beneficiaries. To be partners with India is in your interest. That is a central message that goes out through the CARICOM Summit.
Prime Minister will also be addressing their parliament. Your thoughts?
Yes. No,
That's another gesture.
Yes. Basically, what all there, the highest honors they have, they're all taking out. You mentioned Dominica. Dominica is a small Commonwealth nation in the Caribbean, and they are very happy to offer this highest, their civilian award. And they invite Honorable Prime Minister to, because India is a large democracy, and the leadership is determined of 1.4 billion people, diverse, vast, through peaceful democratic process. This is of great interest to them. Although they also have origin from Africa, they look in this particular manner of democracy and development, and also demography and development towards India, also given the ancestral ties. So that's what we would like to leverage and further strengthen as we promote strategic partnership.
Right. Professor Singh, that question on Prime Minister addressing the Parliament there in Guyana, I think that also has a symbolism attached to it.
I think let me underline the fact that this is a special session being invited of their Parliament for Indian Prime Minister to address them. It's even more unusual because it's not a Parliament in session where Indian Prime Minister is going to address them. It's a specially convened session of Parliament where Indian Prime Minister is going to address them, which clearly means that Indian Prime Minister will have access to engage with the political elite.
Yes.
Not just ministers and president and few people, but the entire spectrum of political elite across party lines, across various regions and so on, which again simply maximizes the kind of engagement that one can achieve from few hours of engaging Parliament, because so many leaders from multiple regions, multiple parts of and multiple sectors will be all in the Parliament, and Indian Prime Minister will get opportunity not just to give a speech, but obviously after the speech there's going to be informal sharing of pleasantries and so on. And in that sense, given the fact that Indian Prime Minister makes great effort to build personal relationships with thousands of people around the world he meets, particularly all the major leaders, he tries to build personal relationship with them. Such opportunities of a special session being convened, bringing the entire political elite to engage with the Indian Prime Minister is again, this is what creates constituencies which will support policies to ensure that the partnerships grows in the coming times, because these are the people who will be taking decisions in coming times. And if they have a positive inclination or a warm understanding or warmth in their imaginations of India,
which they will have,
which obviously this is how you cultivate constituency, yes. Which is where they will not only just focus on building bilateral partnerships, but where need comes, they will support India.
This point of cultivating the currency of faith and trust diplomatically, this innate vision of Prime Minister Modi that we have seen in all these, this being the third term ambassador, in your experience, in your capacity as a former envoy to some of such nations as well, do you see a big shift here?
Yes, Honorable Prime Minister brings great personal experience, very diverse. He has been in public life for close to 4-5 decades, and he is very energetic. So when he goes to a country, he makes it a point to to pull out all his personal connections, and he inquires about where is his who is where, and also those students studying here and informing their well-being to their elders. For example, here is a Supreme Court justice, and we say that your grandson is doing well. That kind of very personal, very great affinity he builds, that has a ready chord. That's why you see the kind of great esteem that he commands. And those scholarships that we give, that we are investing in the future. Say we have 600 of Guyanese who have studied India from different walks of life. If you see, they will go on to occupy leadership positions in business, in academia, in media, and in administration. So all those will be our natural friends and bridges between Guyana and India.
You know, the bridge of global south, Professor Singh, but also coming up as a bridge. I'm a little digressing, but it's pertinent to understand here India's role as the bridge of the global north and the south and south. Professor Singh, right?
Indeed, that has been the unique or quintessential approach of India's foreign policy, and Ambassador would vouch me when I say India has been seen increasingly as a bridge builder, which is where India is trying to connect north and south, east and west, not draw lines, but connect more and more countries together. And that is where, as I started saying, this part of the region was seen as the last frontier of foreign policy. Now, increasingly, Prime Minister, of course, goes there, gives a strategic direction, builds, friendship and camaraderie at the apex level. But a lot of footwork that happens. For example, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, in last 3 years, look at his visits. In 2021, he was in Mexico. In 2022, he went to Argentina, Brazil and Paraguay. Last year, he was in Panama, in Guyana, where Prime Minister is now, Colombia and Dominican Republic. So a lot of footwork happens before such apex level visits can appear to be so successful. And of course, Prime Minister with his own style of hug diplomacy and personal diplomacy and so on, really maximizes opportunities whenever he gets a chance to meet world leaders, sometimes individually, sometimes collectively. So that is part of the new persona of India emerging as a global leader in that sense of global south, at least to begin with. But India would like to call itself friend of the world, not leader of the world in that sense. So you have heard lately also Prime Ministers and other leaders' speeches in India talking about Vishwamitra. That is the imagination of template of where we want to showcase India as friend of the world. And I think that language is becoming increasingly welcome, particularly in countries like Guyana and Suriname, which is where they want to look at India as someone who is coming from their, as I said, ancestral home, someone who looks like their family member, has an informal connection, memories, nostalgia, and so on. And of course, again, along with that, you complement things by providing technology, providing economic partnerships, providing aid and assistance, lines of credit, which supplements the relationship. But the core of relationship is much more sociological, cultural, religious in that sense. And that is what is showcasing that the kind of welcome, the kind of outcomes that happen from these so-called very fast-paced quick visits that Prime Minister makes when he's traveling abroad, is that there is enormous footwork, and Ambassador knows how our missions are constantly working before such an important visit takes place. And footwork is what makes visits looks like immaculate visits, perfect, picture perfect in that sense, and lead to a lot of enormous goodwill for India and of course partnership with India. And India also, there are increasing expectations from India. If India is going to be the third largest economy, it's not going to be the same country as it was. Other countries will have greater expectations from India, and India has to stand, true on those expectations. And that is what is seeing India trying to build as many partnerships in as many sectors with as many countries as possible. And that is why you see this single visit, you could end up seeing Indian Prime Minister having engaged with something like 40 to 45 countries in one visit.
Absolutely.
So I think that is the way India is trying to maximize outcomes from diplomacy, and personal engagements of both Foreign Minister and Prime Minister are really making contributions and making those outcomes possible.
Maximizing the impact, you have 20 to 21 heads of state. I'm talking about the CARICOM, where there are 4 primary pillars. If you could just help us understand as far as the CARICOM template is concerned. We will be talking about security, human and social development, foreign policy coordination and economic integration. So just an insight as to when Prime Ministers speak, interacts, aligns with the rest of the Caribbean neighborhood, what is expected?
Sure. Those are the 4 pillars that you have mentioned that we focus, that is the classical diplomacy, Now we are adding additional dimensions also to that, over and above that. One is that we are taking para-diplomacy, in the sense we are also promoting sister city relations, sister state relations, and also relations between provinces of Guyana and Indian states. This is one thing. And also I want to tell you about the growing tourism through the means of cricket. Now, cricket is something that which binds our two countries. Both countries are very passionate, and recently when the game was played in US and the Caribbean, this was one more dimension that has greatly added to our mutual affinity.
Okay.
And
carry on.
Yeah, and CARICOM is the community of 21 countries, largely British former colonies. They speak English language, and they come together to promote regional cooperation, economic development, and human resources development. India enjoys excellent relations with all the CARICOM countries because we are also English speaking, and our institutions also are enjoy affinity. In fact, I had the privilege of serving, representing in most of those countries. So we all there, for example, judiciary. So judiciary of those countries look up to Indian Supreme Court in All India reporters.
Okay.
So they cite our judgments and rulings with that authenticity that Indian Supreme Court has laid down the law like this. This is the kind of thing. And other institutions also, about election commission. They come for training as to how to conduct elections in a peaceful manner. So this is a multi-dimensional relationship, and the Honorable Prime Minister's visit lends great boost to further promote the strategic partnership that we have.
And from Guyanese perspective, what makes this?
From their perspective, they are very happy to be partner with India, which is the third largest economy and rapidly, sustainably growing at the rate of 7-8%. So naturally, they stand to gain, their trade would increase, and mutual investments will also accelerate Guyanese economic development. And Guyana is now producing oil, which is complementary to Indian economy, because we are importing oil at more than $100 billion bill every year. And we don't need to bring physically all the oil, because one may say that such a large distance at the other end of the universe, what is the point even if ONGC finds and produces oil? No, what we can do is we can swap. Say we can sell oil in that region and have oil nearer to us. So we have today the systems and procedures in place. So that way, whatever oil we produce is a great boost. And India being a oil importing country, and Guyana requires all that India produces, both goods and services, information technology, public health, digital infrastructure, and agriculture. All these things are of interest to Guyana. So they greatly look up to India to have developmental inputs from India, that too from a, as Professor has explained, non-aggressive, non-threatening friendly country like India. This is of great precious value from Guyanese, and also likewise to all other CARICOM countries.
We are joined by veteran foreign policy journalist, senior journalist Atul Aneja ji. Let's also hear him and his thoughts on the significance of the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Guyana. There he is smiling. Thank you very much, Atul ji, for joining us. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Ms. Nakal. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, sir. So, smiling out there, and the kind of acknowledgement coming from the Guyanese side as far as our Prime Minister's visit is concerned, his role as a world leader, and particularly what all he brings to the table when he visits Guyana, and that too after a gap of more than 5 decades. To begin with, your thoughts on the significance of this visit and the fact that he's going to address the CARICOM community as well, so to say. Your thoughts. Why is this important for India? What makes it important for Guyanese all the more?
Sakal, I would go back to the G20 hosted by India last year. And it was made very clear over there that we will be a bridge between the North and the South, East and the West, with a special emphasis of engagement with the Global South. Now, in that particular conference, we saw how we deeply engaged with the African continent, with 56 countries of the African Union joining the G20. So that was one geography. But I think we have expanded from there now. And we're looking at other geographies in the Global South for engagement. And Caribbean happens to be one of the major geographies now for deeper engagement with Global South. So I see a Global South connect and the expansion of India's engagement with the Global South. Coming to CARICOM, it's a collective organization. You mentioned earlier it's about 21, 22 countries. Now it's collective engagement with the entire region. I think that's very important, that it is not, the visit is not just about a bilateral relationship, which it, of course is very important, but it is engagement of the entire Caribbean region, which is much bigger than individual countries. So you have to look at it not in bilateral terms, but in regional terms. So I think this is a process which has happened. These countries are in the North Atlantic. You see, we had Indian Ocean as one geography of engagement. We had the Indo-Pacific, but now we are also having a connect with the North Atlantic, and I think of which the Caribbean island states are a part. I think it just shows India's own rise, for lack of a better word, from being a country which is just being of regional presence, but moving ahead with a global trend.
Okay, Atulji, Atulji, please hold your thoughts. I'm going to come back to you. You can continue with that answer, but we have some news coming in. Acknowledging the grand welcome given to him in Guyana, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just posted on the platform X, and I quote, Prime Minister says, and I quote, "The welcome in Guyana will remain etched in my memory. I was delighted to meet you, Prime Minister Dickon Michel of Grenada, Prime Minister Mia Mortelli of Barbados, and the respected cabinet ministers of Guyana. I am also humbled to have received a key to the city of Georgetown by the Mayor of Georgetown. India is eager to deepen cooperation with the CARICOM across various sectors." Yes, Atulji, what do you make of this and the larger message, and the fact that there is the visit signals the beginning perhaps of a new era, chapter or reset when it comes to India's Caribbean outreach? Would you agree?
Absolutely. And this shows itself even in the PM's tweet just now, which you read out. I mean, it's not one country he's naming. You know, he's talking about Grenada, he's talking about Barbados.
It's a very personalized message where he's specifically mentioned these three heads of the state.
Absolutely. So it shows a collective approach to an entire region with which, you know, we have connections. Other speakers have already elaborated on it, various diaspora connection. What makes it different is the emotional connect. You know, that is the X factor in the relationship between India and the Caribbean countries, as it would happen maybe with Mauritius or some of the diaspora countries. But this is, you know, especially so in the case of Guyana, where 50% of the population is of Indian origin. I think this is the personal chemistry, the emotional connect that we have with the region, along with other soft power attributes, which the ambassador was just talking about, including cricket and building of a stadium, etc. So that makes this relationship very personal and there's an emotional content to it, which otherwise would not be the case. It is not just about economy and agreement signed on various other aspects, but this deepens the relationship much more at a personal and at emotional level.
Ambassador?
Exactly, you know that
the emotional connect that Atulji spoke about. Yeah. Atulji, could you? Okay. We will go back to Ambassador Rajshekhar in a bit, but also a quick one, though we discussed this earlier also in our studio, but since you have joined us, we would like to know your thoughts on various fresh convergences that we are likely to see when the bilaterals are going to be inked, reportedly, collaborations and convergences, although we do know that there is already a robust bilateral mechanism existing between the two countries, but are there going to be more conversations revolving around oil and energy security?
Yes, that's, my knowledge is as good as yours, because this is what I've heard, that oil and gas is going to be a major element in it. and of course Indian investment in the energy sector, in the oil and gas sector in Guyana, and the sale of oil and gas from Guyana to India through a swap arrangement. I just heard the earlier speaker speak about it. So this is the energy element. But I think there is also a new energy element, Sakal, and that is important as well, because Prime Minister Modi and India as a whole is focusing so much on renewable energy.
Right.
And that is also going to be an element in the energy equation between India and Guyana, but I suspect it could be with the entire CARICOM countries. India is the spearhead of the Global Solar Alliance. One Earth, One Grid, if I remember the slogan, partially at least, has been a slogan from India's side. So I think that is also focused on the renewable energy element. Oceanic country, there are maybe other aspects of renewable energy in the Caribbean countries which might be leveraged. I'm not sure about wind or other aspects, but renewable energy definitely is a focus. I would suspect green hydrogen could be one of the elements as well. So these, and plus along with that, Sakal, what we have done well is in terms of what Professor Swaran Singh was saying earlier about digital public infrastructure, DPI, the digital connect. I think apart from energy, that would be another element, digital payments revolution, which has come in India. You see, essentially, Sakal, what has happened, what has changed now is that we are becoming a new model of development for the Global South.
Okay.
It's an example. And not the difference from earlier times is that we were not as big an economy earlier. So in terms of our contributions were limited. Of course, we had ITEC and others, which we have already spoken about. But DPI, new energy, these are things which did not exist earlier. So India, as a modernizer of the Global South, and as a country of South-South cooperation at a different level altogether, I think that these are new elements which gives a buzz to this kind of a relationship. Whether it was earlier with Nigeria and other countries which the Prime Minister has visited, but especially so with Guyana. It's a classic case of advanced South-South cooperation in South.
Okay, that's a pertinent point that he's picked up, Aneja, Aneja, the South-South global cooperation. I mean, we've moved, this is going to only move forward. How do you see that point, the new model of development for Global South being put forth by India?
Yes. Say South-South has been for a long while, but this government has been giving a new definition and new thrust that we have seen in the form of vaccine Maitri, and we have seen in the form of scholarships. As Indians or other developing country students used to go to advanced countries, now you will see large number of foreign students coming and aspiring to study in India on scholarships and go on to occupy positions of leadership in various walks of life. So these are the new things happening. So also there is a calibrated approach between India and other developing countries at international fora, whether it is United Nations, other international financial institutions, or regional bodies, BRICS, and
this
other
is part
places.
Of this calibrated approach.
All this is part of that. And if I may go back, earlier, Mr. Atul Aneja Sahab was saying, emotional thing.
Yeah,
emotional,
we were talking about
that reminds me of, Prime Minister Vajpayee when he visited Lahore. He took a bus to reach there. And he, being a poet, he said that, मैं जो बस से आया हूँ ये इस बात का बस नहीं जज्बात का बस है. So similarly, Honorable Prime Minister Modi also carries and he fully optimizes, marshals that emotional dimension to bring the world and India closer. So we must thank Honorable Prime Minister and also Team India and the Minister of External Affairs team, especially the Team High Commission in Georgetown. earlier professor was saying that, how hard the missions work. So of course, months of work
You
goes
can share
into
your experience.
months of experience, months of preparation goes into Prime Minister's visit, and Prime Minister is there in town 3 days, means Shivaratri Jagaran for all the embassy staff, and also
Right.
people are, staff are brought in from neighboring countries to reinforce the mission, and everything is very carefully, curated. You see that thing. For example, in the previous visit in Brazil, you see the Brazilian scholars reciting,
yes.
Vedic mantras.
Yes.
And say today you have seen
That
them
was phenomenal.
playing, on steel
Sare
pan.
Jahan Se Acha.
Sare Se
In
Jahan.
fact, let me ask Atulji about this. What do you, the symbolism attached to the play out of Atul Aneja, Sare Jahan Se Acha, when the ceremonial welcome was accorded to our Prime Minister? Of course, we had the national anthem of both countries, but then Sare Jahan Se Acha on the Guyana soil has a larger message.
Absolutely. It is geographically far, but again, the connection is so intense and so deep. I'm reminded of Rakesh Sharma when he went on the moon landing, and Mrs. Indira Gandhi asked him that how does India look, and he had the similar slogan. He said "Sare Jahan Se Acha." So just a throwback to us to something which is so deeply emotional for India and Indians. So to see that connection in Guyana was frankly an emotional moment for me personally to see that here. I also liked what the ambassador said about that this was played on that steel band.
Yes, yes.
I think that is also shows how much it comes from the heart. That even when that the genealogy of which he explained that it's that it was from poverty, because of poverty that they cut out the steel sort of units and use that as steel band. I'm also reminded of some of the cricket matches which I watched, and they have a steel band there as well. Playing. So, this is something very, very unique and different. You won't find in other geographies. It has happened here, and it's happened in the honor of the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So, a great moment to see Sare Jahan Se Acha and the steel band.
In the honor of the Prime Minister, you had the cabinet members there. You had the Prime Minister, you had the President there, making the whole reception of Prime Minister Modi very unprecedented and historical. Atulji.
Absolutely. That's the... look at the kind of welcome which he has got, which shows how high, in such high esteem is India looked at, and especially Prime Minister is looked at. He is being looked at as the leader of the global South, if not in a broader category than that. And that is very heartening to see in the kind of welcome. He's also going to address the Parliament. I remember, I think Professor Swaran Singh had said in your earlier half of this program, that this session has been specially called in his honor, which again shows the value which the Guyanese and the CARICOM countries are imparting to the Prime Minister's visit by giving him such a special honor. You see it throughout how the visit has been choreographed. You can see the exceptional affection and honor which the Prime Minister has received here in his stint in Guyana.
Okay. A calibrated approach to invigorate India's ties with the global South, and in particular in this case, Atulji, the CARICOM countries. We're looking at least 21 of them. How do you see that?
Important, because as I said earlier, this is another geography which you are focusing upon. You see, you have seen Africa, you've seen parts of Asia being engaged. But you've seen Indo-Pacific. You recall the visit to Papua New Guinea, which was again an outreach in that geography. But now you see in the Caribbean, in the North Atlantic, I think this is of great importance of another layer being added to India's global outreach. So I think it's very, very important that this has happened with the CARICOM countries. I'll be very curious, Sakal, to see the contents of what transpires in this. I'm intrigued a bit by the defense cooperation is probably one of the elements, defense or security, coming into the equation. I was just wondering what that could be. Possibly training of people from these countries into our military institutions, possibly. But that would, apart from energy and new energy, that would be another very exciting element of the relationship between India and Guyana, and perhaps between India and the CARICOM countries.
Sir, your thoughts?
It begins with training, but gradually it depending on the mutual interest, it pans out to include other dimensions. For example, if you've been to the National Defense Academy, there is this Sudan block. One wonders what has Sudan got to do with the National Defense Academy of India?
Yes.
Actually, during the World War, when India helped the victorious countries, in Africa, so Sudan was made to pay war reparations. So that part of that, about 20 lakh rupees of those times in 1940s, was actually paid to India, and that went into the building of India's National Defense Academy, Khadakwasla.
Yes.
So we have that Sudan block. So like that, we have large number of uniformed officers from other friendly countries like Guyana and other CARICOM countries. They come. This is the first step of the defense collaboration. Then we also offer our non-combat, for example, helicopters, Dhruva helicopter and other kind of things. Then depending on the mutual interest and threat perception and other things, we keep adding layers and additional dimensions of defense collaboration.
In terms of larger message, Prime Minister just concluded a very fruitful and successful Brazil visit. There's so much happening. You have COP happening, you have COP29, you have Russia, Ukraine, you have Gaza, and now here you have the Indian Prime Minister, who is seen as one of the, the kind of stability that he brings to the table. This has been an election here in most parts of the globe, but here you have Indian Prime Minister, third term. In that sense of term, like, the larger message to the rest of the world, Prime Minister Modi of India choosing Guyana?
The message is that India is here as a positive force. Firstly, it's a democracy where the change of leadership happens through peaceful election. Second thing is the economy is growing rapidly, 6, 7, 8% to emerge as the third largest economy. So partnership with India is in the interest of the world. And thirdly, India is willing to share our developmental experience with similarly placed, like-minded, friendly developing countries. So this is to promote goodwill and friendship around India, so that India's growth continues to be sustained, and India is surrounded by goodwill both near and far.
Okay. I would like to have Atul Anecha's thoughts on this. India choosing to aggressively engage with the Caribbeans and choosing Guyana for Prime Minister Modi's visit, wrapping up a Brazil summit. Atulji, your thoughts? The larger message across the globe.
You see, I think we see the glimmer of a new world order here, to be honest. You talk about Ukraine crisis. There's so much negativity, as the ambassador was just saying. You have this Palestinian conflict. But here is positive energy being imparted. And it is imparted by India.
Negativity, or if we were put it in this way, there's a lot of instability. There's a lot of volatility across.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here you're talking about economic development. You're talking about growth, tourism, education. In such a contrast to situation of warlike situations which you see around Gaza and other geographies. So that's where the contrast is, that the new engines of growth are coming in the global system. And India happens, in the multipolar system, India happens to be one of the major drivers now of the new world order. I think this is the larger message which is going out with this visit and the earlier ones in the G20 and to Nigeria.
Yes.
That there are new drivers now, and it is a post-West world which is emerging. And we are one of the major drivers of this new world order, giving hope to a large section of the humanity.
Okay, in this case, the Caribbean community, the aspirations of the Global South. In fact, Atulji and Ambassador Rajashekhar, please stay with us. For the benefit of the viewers who have just tuned into DD India, let's try and contextualize what makes the relationship between India and Guyana very unique, and there are various facets attached to it. And first up, we will talk about Guyana's Indian origin community, which constitutes of around 40% of its population. It forms a very unique bridge between India and Guyana. So these are the numbers on your screen, because about 40% of the population of Guyana is of the Indian descent. That's what makes it unique. Then the number of Indian nationals is not much. It's about 1,500, but these are those who are mostly associated with missions, Indian cultural centers, staff of Bank of Baroda and other international agencies. Also, doctors, nurses, students of private medical institutions. There's a small Sindhi community which is holding different nationalities. That's also something which lives in Guyana. So this is about the Indian community in Guyana, and now let's take a look at the bilateral ties. First up, under the header ITEC, it's a mechanism where at least 800 Guyanese nationals have been benefiting from this program, including streams like IT, telecom, and entrepreneurship, banking, insurance, finance, including accounts and audit. Also, under the bilateral ties mechanism, there are 50 ITEC slots that have been allotted to Guyana in 21-22, and then increased to 55 in EITEC courses in the same year. In 2020-23, 75 slots, more slots were added, out of which 40 were utilized. And also 800 Guyanese nationals have benefited at least these from these ITEC programs in various streams like telecom, education, etc. 9 scholarships are being offered to Guyanese students under Commonwealth Scholarship. You have a Commonwealth Scholarship, you have an ICCR scholarship also for studying Indian culture, out of which these scholarships are given to these Guyanese students. Ambassador Rajshekhar, would you like to talk about, just to give us a little bit more insight as to what is it, the kind of bilateral cooperation that exists between India and Guyana, and the kind of shift that is expected post Prime Minister's visit to Guyana, because it's coming after a long, in fact, 5 decades and more. That's quite a transitionary phase that the world must have seen in the last 5 decades.
Yeah, there can be a tendency, a complacency to ignore, neglect, countries so far away, so small. Here is what the leadership makes a distinct difference.
Yes.
Honorable Prime Minister has instructed us in very clear terms that dur se dur, the farthest and tiniest, chota se chota countries should not ever observe or comment or remark that India doesn't care about it. So this visit goes to show that he means what he has exhorted some time ago. He has traveled all the way, and the visit is on one plane, it is bilateral, to marshal the diaspora linkages. 40% of the people of Guyana are of Indian origin, whose ancestors had gone there 170 years ago as indentured laborers from largely Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and Bengal, and those with only their values and their industry and perseverance, they had gone to occupy leadership positions. We had Cheddi Jagan and today Rama Avatar, and many leaders have emerged from the Indian community, which is truly inspiring.
I'll just interrupt you here. Prime Minister Modi, in his statement previewing his visit, specifically has mentioned about that he's going to pay respects to one of the oldest Indian diaspora. So there's a specific element,
Yes.
who migrated more than 185 years ago.
Yes, when slavery was abolished, then the plantation, so slaves became free and they demanded fair wage from the colonial masters, whether it is British or the French or the Spanish, and the plantation owners, they represented to their respective governments and crowns, okay, you have abolished slavery as a great ideal, but who will cultivate our farms, whether it is sugarcane or other farms? So indentured labor, which is by agreement, was devised as a new means to supply labor from this part of the world to largely Indians had gone from India to Fiji, to Mauritius, to Guyana, to Trinidad and Tobago, to Suriname. These countries you find today almost 40 to 50% of their national population owes their origin to India. So that's why you'll find a lot of strong linguistic, cultural, traditional bonds. And they swear by Ramayana, and they keep fasting, and they're very devout in their religious beliefs, even more than us. They were
World's oldest civilization, sharing civilizational links with a country like Guyana. I think that's what makes the relationship very unique.
So look at the strength, that Indian values and traditions go to the other end of the universe, and they are,
Absolutely.
so very vibrant.
Yes. Atulji, would you like to share your thoughts on that? The civilizational and very strong cultural connect that India and Guyana share, and that's what makes this relationship unique.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. This is a very unique bond of what the ambassador just explained about the indentured labor and why it was required in these plantations. See, the important thing is that this becomes a little India in a way, because the migrants, if I can call them migrants, this indentured labor, really continue to project India's civilizational values. The ambassador talked about Ramayana and, preserving fasting and etc. So basic traditions of India get transported or exported into an entirely new territory. And so you have almost a little India. Remember, Sakal, we have this, the Chinese have these Chinatowns wherever, they're, but this is much more than a Chinatown. This is percent of the population being there.
In fact, Ambassador Rajshekhar was telling us earlier that they fast during Diwali there in Guyana. I mean, that's such an interesting anecdote.
It's such an interesting anecdote. I would now, in our era, what can we do? I think we need to leverage this cultural connect. If we have a Bhojpuri film industry in India, which is fairly well developed. Can we have this another soft power link, like films and music, to connect our two countries? I think that would be a very welcome addition. And especially, Sakalji, is a new generation of people who's growing up in the Caribbean and in India. How do we connect the Gen Z with the Gen Z of the Caribbean? I think it's important that we look at those dimensions also.
Would you like to come in here? Okay, would you like to come in here?
Yes.
The Gen Z Connect.
Yes, they have very interesting local genre of music. For example, Chetni and Calypso is the song that they compose like fast beat. Okay. There is a Calypso on Gavaskar because of on cricket, saying that Gavaskar that went on and on batting and he couldn't be made out, that kind of thing. And Chetni is interesting. Our friend Mr. Atul Aneja Sahab has mentioned about Gen Z. The Chetni music is also interesting, and Bhojpuri is interesting. That these can be further leveraged to promote linkages between youngsters in exchanging their notes in the field of creativity. And Bhojpuri truly is something that...
Interesting. Atulji, how do you see this visit underscoring India's leadership on the global stage, and particularly in terms of advocating the needs of the developing nations, in this case, particularly the Caribbean bloc?
Absolutely, Sakal, because India calls itself as a friend of the world. We usually try to avoid the word leadership. We are Vishwamitra, friend of the world. So in that case, we are exercising that particular doctrine over here. Also, we already mentioned the multifaceted dimensions in which the relationship is going forward, from the economic, from the oil and gas to education. Sakal, if you remember, I think in Tanzania we've opened a IIT.
Right.
The education side needs to be probably leveraged here in the case of the Caribbean countries as well. With perhaps we can add startups, the Indian startup culture to be sort of planted in the Caribbean as well.
Atulji and Ambassador Rajshekhar, we're going to take a very short break. Our special broadcast on Prime Minister Modi in Guyana continues to be on DT India. A very short break. Viewers, don't go. We'll be right back.
छोटे थे तो माँ प्यार से मूर्ख बुलाती थी, मूर्खानंद। और ये तो सच में मूर्ख समझते हैं। कस्टम डिपार्टमेंट वाले बन के कॉल कर रहे हैं और कह रहे हैं कि आपके पार्सल से ड्रग्स पकड़ा गया। सब समझते हैं। पहले डराएंगे, फिर कहेंगे पैसे ट्रांसफर करो। अब प्यार से चाहे जो बुला लो, पर मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं, याद रहे। यूपीआई सेफ है। यदि आपको भी कोई इस तरह डराना चाहे तो उसे कहो मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं।
हैप्पी बर्थडे माय डियर। अरे ये क्या? एप्सिलॉन
मेरी नई स्कूटी के लिए।
ओए बनो सयानी, नहीं तो पैसों पे फिर जाएगा पानी।
मतलब?
सुनो, ऑनलाइन लर्निंग ऐप्स को जांच परख कर आरबीआई अधिकृत बैंक एनबीएफसी से ही आप लोन लीजिए। अनधिकृत ऐप्स या अनजान लोगों से निजी जानकारी शेयर करना यानी धोखा।
दादू बन गई सियानी।
गिफ्ट नहीं खोलेंगे? आरबीआई कहता है इनसे सुनिए,
जानकार बनिए,
सतर्क रहिए।
छोटे थे तो माँ प्यार से मूर्ख बुलाती थी, मूर्खानंद। और ये तो सच में मूर्ख समझते हैं। कस्टम डिपार्टमेंट वाले बन के कॉल कर रहे हैं और कह रहे हैं कि आपके पार्सल से ड्रग्स पकड़ा गया। सब समझते हैं। पहले डराएंगे, फिर कहेंगे पैसे ट्रांसफर करो। अब प्यार से चाहे जो बुला लो, पर मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं, याद रहे। यूपीआई सेफ है। यदि आपको भी कोई इस तरह डराना चाहे तो उसे कहो मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं। छोटे थे तो माँ प्यार से मूर्ख बुलाती थी, मूर्खानंद। और ये तो सच में मूर्ख समझते हैं। कस्टम डिपार्टमेंट वाले बन के कॉल कर रहे हैं और कह रहे हैं कि आपके पार्सल से ड्रग्स पकड़ा गया। सब समझते हैं। पहले डराएंगे, फिर कहेंगे पैसे ट्रांसफर करो। अब प्यार से चाहे जो बुला लो, पर मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं, याद रहे। यूपीआई सेफ है। यदि आपको भी कोई इस तरह डराना चाहे तो उसे कहो मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं।
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
छोटे थे तो माँ प्यार से मूर्ख बुलाती थी, मूर्खानंद। और ये तो सच में मूर्ख समझते हैं। कस्टम डिपार्टमेंट वाले बन के कॉल कर रहे हैं और कह रहे हैं कि आपके पार्सल से ड्रग्स पकड़ा गया। सब समझते हैं। पहले डराएंगे, फिर कहेंगे पैसे ट्रांसफर करो। अब प्यार से चाहे जो बुला लो, पर मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं, याद रहे। यूपीआई सेफ है। यदि आपको भी कोई इस तरह डराना चाहे तो उसे कहो मैं मूर्ख नहीं हूं।
Thanks for staying with us on DD India. You're watching our special broadcast. Prime Minister Modi in Guyana. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as we speak, is in Guyana. And this happens to be his last leg of his three-nation tour. In a very unprecedented and historic gesture, Prime Minister Modi was received at the Georgetown airport. The visuals on your screen by the Guyanese President Dr. Mohamed Irfaan Ali and Prime Minister Mark Phillips. This is first ever visit of an Indian Prime Minister in over 5 decades to Guyana. In a social media post, Prime Minister Modi expressed confidence that his visit to Guyana will deepen the friendship between the two nations. During the 2-day visit, the two sides, that's India and Guyana, will exchange views on giving strategic direction, strategic impetus to a unique relationship which is based on heritage, shared culture and shared values. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be joining the leaders from the Caribbean partner countries for the second India-CARICOM, that is Caribbean Community Summit. The summit will enable the leaders to renew historical ties and also expand India-Guyana cooperation into new domains. As mentioned earlier, Prime Minister Modi will be joining the leaders from the Caribbean partner countries for the second India-CARICOM Summit. Now let's understand what is it about. CARICOM India have forged closer cooperation and ties. CARICOM heads of government and India's Prime Minister, they last met in 2019. Then the leaders met on the margins of the 74th session of United Nations General Assembly. They discussed cooperation modalities in renewable energy and climate change through the $150 million credit line from India. CARICOM Secretariat, Ms. Elizabeth Solomon, has said that India has recognized and acknowledged India's role as an important global sector, or India's important global actor, I beg your pardon. She's also said that our member states are very keen to develop deeper technical relationship and deepen the relationship in terms of advocacy for small states and strengthen people-to-people ties. CARICOM member states have had long-standing friendships with India. Process of formalizing relations with CARICOM as a bloc and India began way back in 1985. Agreement on scientific and technical cooperation that was signed then. Then the first meeting of the CARICOM India Joint Commission was convened in June 2015. In that meeting, they identified areas of cooperation as agribusiness development, food security, health, small business development, marine development, fisheries and disaster management. Basically, just to put in context, what is CARICOM? And what is the kind of collaboration and convergences we are likely to see between India and CARICOM nations or regions? And let me once again welcome Atul Aneja, veteran foreign policy journalist, expert on the show, and also welcoming in our Delhi studio Ambassador Raj Shekhar. Since we were just talking about the whole CARICOM journey so far, after 29, this happens to be the second. Fairly new, but in the last 5 years, what's the kind of growth trajectory and the collaborations that the CARICOM countries have covered, and what makes India's Prime Minister's address more significant in the context of the whole, the global South narrative that is again gaining a lot of global traction?
Yes. Firstly, this is an opportunity post-COVID for our Prime Minister go and renew the acquaintances with the leaders of that part of the world. They are collectively called CARICOM, Caribbean Community. There is a great bonhomie among those small little island countries because they are very small, very small. So, for example, Commonwealth of Dominica is barely 100,000 people. It's a country.
So all erstwhile British colonies.
British Commonwealth country, Dominica. And likewise, Guyana itself is not very big in terms of area. It's only 214,000 square kilometers and a population less than 1 million people. So they stick together very closely, and relations between CARICOM and India are characterized by absolute harmony, and there is never any rancor or any ill will, any conflict, any quarrel, disagreement between us. Our positions on development, disarmament, trade and climate change, all these things are very identical. And as climate is becoming a big issue, that it threatens to low-lying areas along the coast. These island countries and countries like Guyana face immediate danger. In that we work shoulder to shoulder in terms of both adaptation and mitigation of climate change issues, and we coordinate our positions very closely in international organizations like United Nations, international financial organizations, developmental bodies, and also regional organizations, and bodies like BRICS and other countries. And these summits become very important that we have optimized the visit of the Honorable Prime Minister by also inviting heads of governments of the CARICOM countries so that we can reach out to all those countries at one go, optimizing the outcome for us. And
we have the visuals of the delegation level talks between India and Guyana, the Indian side led by Honorable Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi, accompanied by our External Affairs Minister and other dignitaries, and the Guyanan side led by their President. These are the visuals of the delegation level talks. Earlier today, Prime Minister was accorded a ceremonial guard of honor, and now delegation level talks happening between the two sides. This is going to be probably followed by the exchange of MOUs and press statements, but we're going to go wait for that. But this is important. Prime Minister Modi leading the Indian delegation. And as we stay with these visuals, it's also pertinent to talk about the business on table, Ambassador Rajashekhar, the business on table that both sides are going to talk about. And there's already this, we were talking about, this could be a talk about energy security, oil, food security, etc.
Firstly, the countries like Guyana, they look up to India as a major developing country. Today, India has emerged as the third largest economy. So they look to us broadly in agriculture, information technology, and other areas of development. And we have been helping them through training in human resource development, high-tech, and scholarships. And you mentioned about energy. Guyana today has found oil, which is very complementary for us because we import oil to the tune of $100 billion plus 80% of our crude is imported. So this is a welcome addition to already happy ties between India and Guyana through diaspora and through language and through common interests and values. Thanks to this oil that we can look forward to increased trade and investment. That is one dimension. Second thing is also, as we are seeking to address climate change issues, we are laying emphasis on new and renewable energy, which is solar power especially, in which Honorable Prime Minister has taken the initiative to launch International Solar Alliance, and we are promoting solar power, in which we are also collaborating. There is a wonderful training institution, Center of Excellence called Barefoot College in Rajasthan, Tilonia, where they are called solar mamas. So because illiterate women, literally, they are brought to India, all expenses paid, and they go back as solar engineers. So this is nothing less than a miracle.
Expansion of bilateral cooperation, Atul Aneja, what are your thoughts? Likely, what are the kind of deeper engagements or the areas of deeper engagements that are likely going to come up in this visit of Prime Minister Modi? Something in education, infrastructure, energy, oil. Your thoughts?
It's hard to add to the list which the ambassador has just just read out, the various areas. Energy, of course, becomes very, very important. I would only think that probably blue economy would be an area of common interest, given that these are oceanic countries and islands. So that would be one, because India emphasizes on blue economy. Then there is an interesting aspect of disaster management. I think that's where India's focus on resilient infrastructure, I think that would come into the picture as well from the other elements which have already been aired by the ambassador. So essentially, it's a full basket of areas of engagement which cover energy security, food security. So education would obviously be upgraded into that. I think we might even look at training. The ambassador pointed out to the solar mamas. I think that's a great initiative, links up with the Solar Alliance. But perhaps startups would be another avenue where Indians and the Guyanese and in fact the whole CARICOM countries can come together. I would think that culture is another dimension which we need probably may get emphasis, may or may not, but definitely is a potential area of cooperation and big time cooperation over here. In fact, cricket is another element. The ambassador pointed out about this cricket stadium which we have built, but I think the West Indies cricket as a whole needs to be revived big time. And in fact, it's a loss for the entire world. When I was in my school and college, and it used to be this famous team. I remember Clive Lloyd's team coming over here, Alvin Kalichar and great fast bowlers like Andy Roberts and others. That breed has disappeared. I think it's a loss for the entire cricketing world. If we and the BCCI can be of some assistance to actually revive and reseed cricket in the West Indies and in the Caribbean countries, I think it will be a global contribution.
Like we have FICCI in Georgetown, they also have the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. They call it GCCI. So there's a lot of convergence that has already happened. Ambassador Rajashekar, if you could just help us understand, we've been, in fact, the report that my colleague Siddharth, he filed, he spoke about the transformation that Guyana witnessed post-2015, post the discovery of crude oil and the drilling.
They're growing at breakneck speed. See, normally we have seen in economies, for example, developed countries, if they grow at 3%, they celebrate big way. And we are growing at 7-8%. This is also cause for celebration. Here is Guyana, which is growing at hold your breath, 60% per annum. And today, thanks to such rapid growth, today the per capita GDP stands of Guyana at more than $20,000 US. So that is the thing. So here is an opportunity for India to reach out and promote prosperity to both people of Guyana and also to India through enhanced trade investment, especially in the areas of energy, because they have oil and there is much that India can do given our